The United Nations says it is fearing a, quote, bloodbath in northern Syria as government troops are pushing hundreds of thousands of refugees towards the border with Turkey.
Some 900,000 people have been displaced in northwest Syria since the 1st of December, exceeding the worst-case planning figures by the humanitarian community. Let me stress that when I say 900,000 people, it's actually mostly children. 60% of those are minors.
Turkey is sending tanks and reinforcements into the country to stop the Syrian army's offensive. This morning, Turkey's president called for the leaders of France and Germany to discuss the growing humanitarian crisis. For more on this situation in northern Syria, I'm joined by Dr. Aykan Erdemir, senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So, just a question, why have we seen such a huge spike in the number of refugees in the last couple of months?
This was triggered by the attacks by forces loyal to Bashar al-Assad, as well as his Russian and Iranian backers. And we have seen on multiple fronts in Syria's northwest Idlib region, assault not only on what the Syrian regime considers as terrorists, but also on civilian populations. Hence, up to 1 million people in Idlib who have been earlier displaced from other parts of Syria are now pushing north toward the Turkish border, but that border is closed with high walls, so people are now stuck in between, and many of them are minors, children, and we have horrible reports of children freezing to death in these very harsh mountain conditions.
What do you think the Syrian president hopes to gain with this offensive?
Now, his plan is basically to use brute force to capture all of Syria from rebel-held territory. He has strong support from Russia and pro-Iranian forces. To be frank, there's not much pushback either from the US or the European Union, so he feels that he has a free hand in imposing his will in the region.
I know this has been referred to as a kind of a proxy war between Russia and Turkey. What exactly is meant by that?
Now, since the beginning of the Syrian civil war, Turkey's goal was to topple the Assad regime and replace it with a Muslim Brotherhood regime loyal to Ankara, but that didn't materialize. And when Turkey allowed a lot of jihadists to cross the border into Syria, that further delegitimized Syria's moderate opposition. So today, what we see is Russia backing Assad, as well as pro-Iran militia backing Assad on the one side, and Turkey backing some Syrian rebel forces. But as we speak today now in Idlib, it's less a proxy war and it's now more a direct confrontation between Turkish troops and forces loyal to the Assad regime.
When it comes to NATO, do you think they could get dragged into a fight with Russia?
Now, Turkey has already turned to the US and asked for Patriot missiles for protection against the Russian Air Force. And if Russia and the Assad regime attacks Turkish forces in Turkish territory, Turkey could turn to Brussels, to NATO, and invoke Article 5, which would require support from NATO allies. But I think there is great reluctance on the part of European and American allies. They do not want to be dragged into a confrontation, a military confrontation with Moscow. So this continues to be a very tricky diplomatic and military encounter.
Yeah, we shall see what happens. Well, thank you so much for your insight, Dr. Erdemir. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.